It is time for Spirit Daily. I'm Zach Martin along with Michael Brown, who has just got back from Medjugorje. And why don't you just tell us what happened while you were there? You sent me a picture, and I think that there was a spirit going up the hill, something to that effect, a priest who's well known in that area?
Yeah, it was very interesting while we were there. Of course, that's a place where the Virgin Mary's been appearing since June of 1981. And we had a group of, there were about 55 of us, including 3 priests and a couple deacons. And we happened to be there when our at the top of Apparition Hill, and one of our 2 guides, Slavenka, showed me a picture on her cell phone that was taken of what they call Cross Mountain there, which is a bigger hill with a cross on the top. Takes quite a while to get up it. And there had been a priest who I think was there for Medjugorje for at least 17 years, and he was much loved and considered to be a kind of a saintly guy. And he used to climb up this mountain, which takes nearly an hour every other day. And on one of his trips up there, about 18 years ago, he died of a heart attack right near the top. And so there's a memorial for him there, a stone. And one of the pilgrims who was in another group a month before had taken a picture of people going up the mountain, and there was like this orb of light. And when you zeroed in on it, it's this form looks like a Franciscan priest, even with the cincture. You know, the belt around the robe, a long Franciscan-style robe, and that's exactly how Father Slavko was his name, how he appeared. So, I don't know, maybe he's assisting those who are going up the mountain these days.
Where is Medjugorje located?
Well, it's in former Yugoslavia, so that's just across the Adriatic from Italy, inland a bit. It's really Croatian. It's really nearly part of Croatia, but it's a separate country of Herzegovina. There's a number of different countries there: Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, Serbia, and so forth. They all used to be Yugoslavia, and that's where it's located.
And are they Slavic people?
Yes, yes, they are, and they speak Croatian there in Medjugorje. There's Catholics, there's Orthodox, and there's Muslims, kind of an equal measure in the village. And some people think that's why the Virgin Mary chose to appear there, to try to unite those different religions and peoples, because all 3 believe in her and have devotions to her.
Well, not only that, but Muhammad's daughter is named Fatima, and it's interesting that we have Our Lady of Fatima.
That's right, and that's because Fatima was named after her. You know, the Muslims for many years had occupied Portugal and had named that territory after the daughter of Muhammad. So there's that link too.
And as far as the message from Fatima and Medjugorje, what are they?
Well, you know, similar as far as prayer and taking part of the sacraments and so forth. At Medjugorje, there's an emphasis on fasting also, and basically finding peace in your life. She's called Queen of Peace there. And so that's that's one of the main messages there. And boy, I'll tell you, Zach, you feel it there. I mean, when you go there, there's a different sensation than anywhere I've been, just about anywhere on earth. I have found the same thing at Guadalupe and in the grotto at Lourdes, a few select places, maybe at the high points of an unusual, rare mass somewhere. But there you just, the whole village is like the grotto at Lourdes, and you feel this power, you feel this grace, you feel this peace, you feel this connection. It's so easy to pray there. It'd be nothing to go through 10 or 20 rosaries there. I certainly have done that. You just reel them right off. And the masses are just jammed. There's 5 daily masses usually, and you can't get in. You can't get into church every day.
Well, that's a good problem for the pastor or the priest to have, a packed church, and have to do offer more than one liturgy. Now, are there Orthodox people that go up to the area, Muslims that go up to the area?
Yes, I mean, I don't have any numbers and so forth, but absolutely. And you have a lot of people from different walks of life. The first time I went to Medjugorje, I ran into Don Shula, the football coach.
Huh.
And he and his wife were looking up at the sun because, like at Fatima, there are sun miracles there. And I was seeing it, too, and I ran up and asked him if they were seeing what I was. And then when he turned around, it was Don Shula. That was on a vineyard, and that was back in 1990. But now it's grown tremendously. There's hotels. It's as big as Fatima as far as hotels and so forth now, and it just keeps on keeping on. It keeps on growing with people coming from all over the place, and most people, the vast majority, going back transformed.
And just, I'm curious as to this part of it. As far as the Roman Catholic Church, do they have any Eastern Catholic liturgies that are at Medjugorje?
I don't know. They may, Zach, at times have, if they have a big enough group. I've never encountered that there, but I can't see why they'd be opposed to it whatsoever.
Well, because back in the old days, a lot of times, and this happens to come over to the United States at one point, where you have these Eastern Catholics / let's just call them / Orthodox, and they would go back and forth between patriarch to pope, depending on what priest was available in their area. So you see that here in the United States with some of the older Orthodox churches. I just find it an interesting phenomena.
It is. And by the way, I should mention, Zach, as far as prophecy, that at Medjugorje, like at Fatima, secrets have been given to the visionaries. At Medjugorje, there's 6 visionaries, and they each are to have 10 secrets. 3 of them already have 10, and the other 3 have 9 at this point. And she stops appearing to them on a daily basis once they are given their 10th. But the indications are that some of those secrets are very, let's say, sobering, that they involve warnings that will be given to mankind in the way of regional events, major regional events that they have to do with the church, the Catholic Church, maybe the Christian Church in general, as well as Medjugorje, which has gone through certainly its ups and downs through the years, now officially accepted as a pilgrimage site. And then the last few secrets seem to have to do with what they call chastisements.
Yes.
Major global events that will come in the future, and indications from there have been that whatever these events are, they will reduce the world or great parts of the world into a peasant lifestyle, just like Medjugorje was when she first started to appear there.
Well, we're very close to that happening in the United States if we keep going down the road that we're going, and these chastisements that are heard by these visionaries at Medjugorje as well as Fatima. What are some of them, and what would you say are some of the signs in your mind that we're seeing taking place right in front of us now?
Well, I think that you're seeing what I would call pre-warnings. You're seeing. We have a story on Spirit Daily today on the sand shifting. That has to do with the rumblings, the various earthquakes that have been around the world. These are kind of glimmerings, I think, of what will occur in the future. It's very fascinating, Zach, that speaking of Fatima, we have the 3rd secret where an angel was seen in a vision by Sister Lucy there, touching the world with a flaming spear or sword. And I took that, as did so many people, to mean nuclear war, because so much of the Fatima secrets had to do with Russia. However, in the 1940s, I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but in the 1940s, Sister Lucia wrote that she had been given a further enlightenment, and that she said the tip of the spear as a flame is unlatching and touching the axis of the earth. And then she says the earth shudders, mountains, cities, towns, and villages with their inhabitants are buried. The sea, the rivers, and the clouds emerge from their limits, overflowing and bringing with them in a whirlwind houses and people in numbers that are not possible to count. She said it's the purification of the world as it plunges into sin. Hatred and ambition cause the destructive war. That's an amazing elaboration on the third secret of Fatima, given by the visionary from Fatima who received the third secret and revealed it.
What are some of the things that we're seeing right here in the United States as far as President of the United States and what's going on with Congress and maybe some different combinations of things that are happening through the world? I'd like to get your perspective on that because I think that you have a unique perspective. You have the Syrian issue, you have Iraq, you have Iran, you have Afghanistan, you have the Russians, you have the Chinese. It just seems to, and the Turkish, the people, the Turks, it seems to becoming really a cauldron of trouble.
Yes. I think the door's being opened to some prophecies I've heard from years. There's a fella I know and I respect tremendously named, was Dr. Howard Storm. Now he's Reverend Howard Storm. He's a minister. He was a professor in Northern Kentucky University, and until he had a near-death experience. And he said that during his experience, being on the other side of the veil, if you will, angels showed him the future of America. And he saw a similar thing, by the way. He saw America turned into a third world country. And I think we're seeing that occur right now. And also, I think most importantly, he saw chaos, and others like him who've had near-death experience have seen invasions by Russia and China taking over either literally or figuratively the United States after it suffers through natural calamities and is reduced to that third world status. And you know, I think we're opening a door right now certainly to Russia and China. And we're not really, it's not really all our fault. I mean,
no.
China is just on the rise. And I think I'm not sure Manos who's president. These things are going to unfold, you know, and because they have to unfold.
Well, I have my own perspective of it, and I won't mention it at this time because I really don't want to upset the apple cart and get everybody pissed off at me because I see the world in a different way. I guess in a different way or with different lenses on. I find it really interesting that in many ways we were always the Christian country, the United States of America, right? And Russia was always the big bad atheist and the non-believers. And yet now it seems like things are being flipped where Putin is always going to church. Now, I know that Donald Trump says that he's a Christian and I guess he goes to church, but Putin does this publicly. And he's got a decent relationship with the Patriarch of Moscow. And the people are coming to the faith in droves in Russia. I guess if you suppress something long enough, it'll blossom somehow. And the work of the Lord is being done over in former communist areas. People actually cherish their faith. Not so here. We've gone off the path. And as a result, just like Israel did, they went and worshipped other gods, strange gods. They brought in alien customs, and look what happened to them. They fell.
Well, this connects to Medjugorje again. At Medjugorje, let me just say this. Let me qualify certain things about Russia. I've been over there in the former Soviet Union, and I've seen the resurrection of Christianity there myself. I've gone to the churches that were abandoned under communism or turned into warehouses and garages and for livestock. So I agree to an extent. I'd be cautious about Putin. I mean, there's plenty of information about assassinations, and I don't think that's real Christian.
Well,
I think that the Russians, people themselves, are fulfilling what was said at Medjugorje. At Medjugorje, the Virgin Mary said back in the early 80s, she said the West, meaning the Western world, has progressed but has done so without God. Russia will be a country in which God is glorified. So, I think we're seeing that happen. I'm not sure that I would tend to disagree as far as Putin. But
well, I didn't say that. I've asked that question too. I got to be very careful how I proceed here. that question or that conversation has come up with certain people in my world, and you know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is always, I can't say, but he shows up. You know, it's a start. So you cannot, and as far as I think, as from my perspective, you can't show up to church on a regular basis and hear the gospel on a regular basis and be around the body of Christ on a regular basis and not have something positive come out of that. And it might, you'll have a change of heart eventually, I would say, unless you're from the evil one, and we can't make that call. But, I don't know about him. I don't know what he really believes or anything like that. But I'll tell you what, compared to some of the other leaders in our own country who claim they're Catholic and are for abortion on demand, you make the call.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with it. I mean, it's extremely hard to say. I don't judge anyone. I wouldn't dip into that cold water he does every year. I think it's in January when Putin goes into that.
Yeah, it's the Feast of the Theophany, the baptism of Christ.
That's tough duty.
Yeah, well, I always marvel. I'm like, good thing I'm the priest. I don't have to do that one.
But at any rate, I'm not going to judge him. I am going to say that I'm concerned about many of the reports of enemies of his suddenly being poisoned or otherwise dispensed with.
Well, there's a whole system of things that happen over there as well. And let's face it, we are in a kind of I would say, a Cold War with Russia right now. They've been taking the heat for what happened in the last election, and I think the people pointing the fingers have a lot of nerve. They're hypocritical because they were all involved. Let's go back up a little bit. We want to talk about this just simply. I remember a time when Romney was going against Obama in 2012, and they asked Mitt Romney, who's the biggest threat moving forward? He said Russia, and everybody laughed at him. Remember that?
I don't specifically.
Yeah, well, they laughed at him. And then President Obama's like, hello, the 80s called, they want their foreign policy back. So Russia wasn't a threat when Romney made that statement back in 2012. And then there's the hot mic issue where President Obama is talking to the then president of Russia about after the election, I'll be able to make a deal. So the narrative just doesn't match up with me. I'm not buying it. I'm also not buying this whole Ukraine thing and how it's being used to bring down a president. Not buying any of it. I think that our country is going to fall apart because of what's going on within. We're imploding. And they're to me, the whole thing looks very high school, and God's not part of any of that stuff. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting times, rollicking times, as I say out there. I passed in front of Mar-a-Lago the other day, a couple of days ago. I was down to see a Christian doctor, as a matter of fact, very fascinating guy in West Palm Beach. He had he had a Lazarus type experience with a patient, and was on all national media for it. In which a guy came back literally from the clinical dead right in front of him after he uttered a tremendous heartfelt prayer. Real Christian guy. It's great to be with a cardiologist who comes in a room and says, "Blessings to you. Let's give God the glory this day." But and he told me he's persecuted because he prays with some of his patients. There are doctors who won't send patients to him. But yeah, as far as Russia, yes. I mean, I think I've been to Ukraine. I've been to places where the Virgin Mary appeared in Ukraine, a half a dozen places. And wow, once again, she comes, the Virgin Mary does, where there's simplicity, where there's frankly poverty, where there's a peasant lifestyle. Whether it was Fatima, Medjugorje, whether it's in Ukraine at Hirushu and other places, Arvenizia, or I've been in deep Africa in Kabeya, Rwanda, where she said she was appearing there because it was one of the last pure places on earth. And let me tell you, Zach, it's one of the poorest also.
Well, it's funny how that goes. Well, I'm not surprised. It's not funny how it goes because their riches, their bank accounts are in heaven. They're worrying about the eternal reward and not these earthly rewards that decay. and are eaten up by moths. So we got a lot of exciting stuff that we just talked about there. I mean, we can go back to it and try to figure out what's going on the world stage. But I want to move to something else that is at Spirit Daily, on the spiritdailyblog.com. And it's this whole article written about the Earth rocks. So let's talk about that. And it also goes back to the Secret of Fatima. So why don't you give us the background on this great article that you can find at spiritdailyblog.com, and also visit the site spiritdaily.com.
Thank you for that. Yes, part of it is what I mentioned about that further enlightenment of Sister Lucy in the 1940s. But it just basically has to do, and again, goes back to what you were indicating with, are there any pre-signs or signals right now, signs of the times, if you will. And I'm just indicating in this article that, yes, there is, look at California recently. Last Thursday they found out that a what they call a Garlock fault is moving for the first time on record. There have been a flurry of earthquakes from L.A. to San Francisco in just the last 2 weeks, and all around that rim of fire, the Pacific Rim.
The Ring of Fire, yeah.
Yeah, the Philippines and Japan. Even Texas had several temblors in the past few days. So figuratively, politically, or seismically, whatever you want to talk about, the Earth seems to be shifting beneath our feet.
Well, the picture that you have in the blog is this gigantic wave hitting Manhattan, and I'm going to tell you something. I don't think I don't think you and I will be able to do this podcast anymore if this happens, because my building is obviously consumed by that wave. And here's something very interesting when you think about this. Sodom and Gomorrah, let's go back. And Abraham going is, if you find one righteous person, will you spare it? And God goes, yeah, I'll spare it. Well, Lot leaves and his wife turns back. Now, I've had conversations like this with fellow priests, and, they basically say that New York is the new Sodom and Gomorrah, the new Babylon, all of those expressions. It's an evil place to live. And I say, well, that might be so. But let me just say this. There's a lot of spirituality, a lot of believers in the New York area, a lot of people actually doing God's work by feeding the poor and housing the homeless and visiting the sick and visiting those in prison and doing the various corporal works of mercy and the spiritual works of mercy and prayer, and people going to church. I see young people showing up at liturgy in bigger numbers each and every week, and I'm thinking, wow, that's fantastic. So while we might have a lot of bad things happening here in New York City, we have a lot of good things as well. So I do you think that how does that work, Michael? I mean, I guess I'll go up to heaven right away, so that's the good side. But I don't like the idea of this picture of this wave coming at me, and it just says to me, make sure that you're always ready to go. Make sure that you're always praying and that you live a life of prayer and you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ as your Savior. That's what it says to me.
That could be any city, in the world, really. I know it's New York in this depiction, and it's also an old one because you see the World Trade Center, but. I don't think you can pick on a certain city. I mean, look, God.
I think Washington should go first. Well, anyway.
Well, what about L.A.? But I think that San Francisco's on the ocean too. But anyway, and Miami down where I am, you never know what's going to happen, where it's going to happen, and it can be far inland. No one knows what's going to happen, and no one can judge like God does. God, when He looks at a city, He's looking into the souls of everyone in that area, not just, major events that you and I see. And I know there's a lot of good in New York. There's no question about that. And in the New York area, I mean, New Jersey, I've done more retreats in New Jersey than anywhere but Florida because you have so many very, very intense Catholics there. And it's actually, along with Florida, our favorite state to minister in because of the receptivity. So, yeah, I mean, and Long Island also has, and upstate New York. So it's certain that picture's not any judgment on our. It was just a picture we found.
Yeah, good job.
Looking for an illustration.
Good job on that one. Let's talk about this part of the article. The Hebrew prophet Ezekiel wrote 2,500 years ago that in the last days of history, Russia and Iran will form a military alliance to attack Israel from the north. Now, this is very interesting in that I can swear that I read something to the same effect that when they do these things about Nostradamus, you might remember it was in the movies with We Shall Sell No Wine Before It's Time, that guy, and the Nostradamus effect of this alliance between Russia and Iran. Why don't you give us a little bit of your take on that as well?
Well, I don't claim to know all that much about Nostradamus. I have read some of the items, but of course, he tended to the occult, and so kind of keep a distance with it. But nonetheless, interesting, and it's not like the Holy Spirit can't work through whomever. And as far as Iran and Russia, I do figure I do think they figure into the future, but just how, I don't know. I mean, we were mentioning before, while this is talking about invasions and the war of Gog and Magog or Magog, whatever it is, and the part that Syria may also play as well as Iran. And this one guy says, when you see Damascus fall, you know that in a ruinous heap, you're in the end times or whatever. I don't know, but how does the Russia being the invader factor into, at the same time, this notion of Russia being the place where God is most glorified, according to Medjugorje? So it's difficult to say, impossible to say. I can't really answer it.
Well, it's something interesting to look over. And again, it's just a reminder of be prepared all the time, live life to its fullest, and that means being in the grace of God.
Every minute of it, treat every minute like it might be your last.
That's right.
You're on your way to heaven.
And finally, we will wrap this up with one other article that you sent to me that I find very interesting. All your articles are very interesting. I mean, let me just say, I love what you're doing. I love spiritdaily.com. I look at it every day, and sometimes you'll send me the various articles after we get done talking, and then by the time we're ready for our show, I'm like, well, what do you want to talk about? There's a lot to go over. Let's talk about this miraculous divine mercy image. What is the divine mercy image to begin with? There's a saint that's attached to this?
Yes, Saint Faustina. She was a nun in Poland.
Okay.
And she had these revelations in which Jesus appeared to her with grace, these beams of light coming out of him, and giving grace, giving mercy. She says that through prayer she was able to stave off a chastisement, of chastisement in a major city in Poland. At any rate, that image has been duplicated tens of millions of times now.
Yeah,
she has been made a saint.
Yeah, I've seen it around.
And there's even a feast day of Divine Mercy now, which is the week after Easter in the Roman Catholic Church. And when we were in Medjugorje, our group went to a nearby village where there's a beautiful image of Divine Mercy, and the account of this fellow named Ugo Festa, who was from Italy, and he had severe multiple sclerosis, and he was deteriorating, a contorted spine and everything else. And back in 1990, he went to Rome on a pilgrimage, and he saw Jesus, an apparition of Jesus, come out of that Divine Mercy image, and he was healed instantly. Just stood right up from his wheelchair that he'd been in for decades, and that was the end of his illness. So it was a very intriguing story and a very beautiful image that he promulgated.
And I got one from my side of the fence to the Orthodox side. You ready for this one?
Sure.
It's a streaming mirror icon of Hawaii. It's a Mother of God holding the baby Jesus, I believe. Uh-huh. Anyway, I have a friend of mine whose son was born with Down syndrome, and at first he couldn't see. But the icon visited St. Peter's and Paul's Russian Orthodox Cathedral in Passaic. Now, this cathedral was funded by the Tsar, Nicholas, Tsar Nicholas II. $100,000, which I guess at the turn of the century, 1902, was a lot of money.
Wow.
Anyway, somehow the myrrh, I guess, is put on the forehead, or the child interacts with this icon, and he's cured of his blindness, so now he can see.
Wow.
So at one point during a conversation with Father Stephen, who's the rector, he tells me that the streaming icon streams all the time with the exception of Holy Week. I'm like, wow, I really, it's like in Orthodox school, I never paid attention to that. Other people are better at it than I am. Mm-hmm. So I go, well, why did it stop streaming? So here's what he says. Streaming icons usually do stop during Holy Week because of the solemnity. The Hawaiian icon starts streaming again during Holy Saturday liturgy, and myrrh comes out out of her like a faucet. It was especially streaming this year, and later on we found out why. Father Nectorius, the guardian, had gone blind this year from sudden onset diabetes, and his eyesight was restored by the icon. The Theotokos appeared to him. Then he could suddenly see.
Wow.
The doctors have no medical explanation. Mm-hmm. So I just am leaping for joy at this story. And the next time the streaming myrrh icon from Hawaii comes to one of my churches that I'm around, I'm going to make sure that I go and visit it. You see, Michael, I don't need to see it to believe it. I believe it. But, boy, it'd be something to see. Just like when you went to Medjugorje.
You feel the grace.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. And just like that Orthodox church just outside of
Chicago.
Out of New York City, out on Long Island.
Long Island, yeah.
I mean, I've been there, and you can feel the grace, and miracles have occurred with that, too. I once saw a icon in Tucson, Arizona at an Orthodox church that started to exude drops of blood on Holy Saturday, so kind of in line with what you were talking about.
Well, there you go. There's always something. There's always a miracle. A miracle. Hey, Michael, it's a miracle that any of us get up every day. It's a miracle when a baby is born. I mean, the odds are really stacked against that whole thing, right? The birth, it's stacked against the humans, but it's a miracle when a baby is born. It's a miracle when, the sun comes out and you dry up. I mean, just look for the miracles. People are like, I don't see any miracles, but you gotta look a little bit deeper. And sometimes, Michael, when you pray for a miracle to happen to you, let's say you're sick with something, sometimes you're not cured physically, but you are cured spiritually.
Good point.
So just remember, that's the importance of prayer. Read your scripture every day. Attend church on a regular basis. And if you do attend church on a regular basis, it doesn't mean that you act differently on Sunday and go back to your old way during the week. You got to live that every moment of your life. Right. You could follow us at facebook.com/BigFatAmerican. Yay, it's a nice fan page. You could also download the streams that we have for you or the podcast that we have for you at iTunes. Just look for Spirit Daily and check out the website. Go to spiritdaily.com.